Welcome to the Majuscule of D, the fourth in the series. Again, same as before, my X height is 5mm, which means my majuscule height is going to be 15mm. I'm using a Leonard EF principal nib in an oblique holder with watercolor ink inside. That's purely because it dries quickly, so I can edit my letters and annotate them as I go. It is not going to produce the finest hairlines. If fine hairlines is what you're looking for, then I would recommend either Walker's Copperplate ink or Zilla's is quite good, or Walnut ink is also very good. So it is skipping, which is not good. So, in a capital D, as you saw, it is done in one stroke. Give me 2 seconds, I'll just clean off my nib so that it doesn't become unusable. Okay. It is done in one stroke. You begin over here with the universal line of beauty. Same as before, so that when you are at the very top of the letter, it should be going parallel to the second ascender line, so the maximum height line, and at the bottom it should be parallel, and you should be able to continue along on the baseline going in this direction. So that should be heading in that direction. Okay, it's very, very important to make sure that you don't dip below the baseline. Otherwise it will start to deform your letter and be less legible. So this extension of the universal line of beauty, if I do it in monoline just here, should be that. So it should be exactly along the baseline. Okay, so we can do it in 2 stages if we want. So we can break up this letter, should you need to, by stopping at your universal line of beauty, completing your loop on the bottom. Roughly the loop on the bottom, as far back as it goes from touching the baseline, that's how far up this section is. So I have just eyeballed it, there's no exact way to measure, but the letter does start to look unbalanced if the width and height are not approximately equal. Okay, so we then have to loop back up, touch our second ascender line, and come back down. Okay, so I am just touching this second ascender line, just barely, but it needs to make sure, even though the height of the encased portion of the D is not going to be as tall, so it is going to fall back down, it still needs to be an encased oval. So if I edit it on here so we can see, so this should be an encased oval that is on the slant line. And you can see when I've gone to bisect my oval to dictate where the slant line is, I've actually come up against the underturn of the oval right here. So we've got a second oval right in here, which is pretty easy to see. So I could just shade that in, so that's a little bit easier right there. So we've got one oval encased in there and a whole oval encasing the majority of the letter. These ovals should be parallel, both on the slant line. If they are not, then it's going to look as if your letter is leaning either left or right along the slant line too far. You also need to make sure that if you are doing your majuscule in stages, that your shade, so your darkest lines, obviously will be at the start in this section right here. But if you are changing your direction at any point, which a lot of people do, so a lot of people stop here and then either turn their paper or whatever is easiest for them. It does mean that there is a risk of this section being a downstroke. That can't happen. We can't have two thick strokes next to each other here. It makes the letter look too busy in the center. So we should always have thick, then thin, then thick, then thin again. Yeah, in that pattern. So we have thick, thin, thick, thin. Oh, sorry. We have thick, thin, thick, thin. Right. So we also have the fact that this oval here, I think I need another color, that's craziness. There we go. So this oval right here, this space, this negative space on the left hand side, is being as close as possible, I know it's just eyeballing, should be bisected by this line. So this shaded area here should be bisected by this line. If you do not have roughly, and I mean roughly, an equal amount of space either side of this underturn here, then your letter is going to look heavy on one side. So can I fit that in there? I can. I could fit that down here. Yeah, so I could fit that right here, I think. Right, so you can see here that my ovals are still on the slant line, but I've got a massively exaggerated gap on this side compared to that side, and it looks as if my letter is spaced incorrectly. There's too much gap here, and it makes it draw the attention to that gap rather than the letter itself. So you'll lose your legibility. We also have the fact that wherever you cross in your letter, so if I make that right here, that should be as close to 90 degrees. I think I'm still in frame. I am. As possible. So the hardest part about a D is managing all of that and doing it in one stroke. So as you've seen me do, there are multiple places where you can stop. It is always easier to continue a hairline than to continue on a downstroke, like a thicker part. So if you do need to stop, make sure that you are stopping at a hairline point, ideally where they cross over, so you can hide the fact that you've stopped. Okay, so do not stop on a thick part. It's going to be so much harder work in order to get that as the same thickness as you had it, even if you're colouring it in later on. That's going to pose quite a challenge. In a D, there are areas that you can flourish. So for example, if I take this one right here, even though it was wrong as it is, we could take up this part and use it to bisect that space. We could also make our oval deliberately too short so it is not reaching this area, this limit that we've set from the bottom, and we could create a loop that then does meet, as long as you've again eyeballed equal distance-ish in between these areas. Okay, we also need to have a good amount of distance between the very top and the bottom. Obviously the bottom is going to be lifted a little bit because of this line right here. So we just need a way to make it look to look as if the oval here is placed correctly. A good way to do that is to say, right, well, if we just take it slightly above, it means that the halfway point moves slightly above. That's my true halfway point, so that's at 1.5 times the x height. My new halfway is going to be slightly above, and that is what is bisecting my circle. You could call that like 1.8 or something times the x height. Okay, so that is roughly how to do a D. Just again, make sure that everything's on the slant line and your thick and thins are in the right order. Stop when you can, should you want to, and everything should be all right.